Hello, my universal people. I'm going to share right now a realization that occurred to me over the past year and that has been the catalyst for the greatest transformation of my own life. And this realization is actually a universal principle, it can be thought of in that way, which applies to each and every person in each and every life, including you. And so I'm going to make it as concise as possible right now and just get to it. Okay, so the realization is this, that there is a universal story that every life, every person goes through. The story can be thought of as a story with many different chapters. Each chapter is a progression from the one before it. And so the very first chapter, and I do want to mention, you may be thinking, what? My story isn't the same as your story. Well, it's the same story clothed in different clothing of experience per se. So it has different colors of experience and of events, but the underlying same themes are the same for each chapter. They just occur differently for each and every person, which gives each and every person the unique experiences that they've had in their lifetime. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the story and start at the first chapter. First chapter, we're born into ignorance. This is just the truth. Each and every one of us is born into ignorance. We really don't know what there is to know. Okay, that's the first chapter. And the next chapter that we all come into, or I would like to believe that we all come into, is the realization that we are more than our physical bodies, and that physical may be not as physical as we thought in terms of physical. And so this is when we realize that we have a mind and we have a body. Later on I'll get to the emotions, but I really do believe that the realization of the mind as an entity upon itself comes first than emotions. For at least that's my experience that I've had. For females, maybe they come into contact with their emotions before their mind. I'm not exactly sure about that. However, I do know that we come to realize that we have a mind. Okay, that's the second chapter, and if we pass that test and really truly acknowledge that we have a mind, then we come to the next chapter. And the next chapter is that, okay, well, if we have a mind, well then what's the nature of mind? How does it function? What are the properties of mind? What is mind? And this is when we become aware that mind actually entails many thought processes which have been conditioned into us through establishments, media, government, education, our parents, people around us, and that actually mind is made up of mostly thoughts and mostly conditional thought loops, patterns, which we suddenly become aware of. And so then this next chapter is the one in which most people spend most of their lives at, or at least several years. And it doesn't have to take that long. You can take as long as you want. For me, it has taken about 4 years now, to where I become aware of the conditioning. And then this next chapter is the one where I've taken 4 years at, which is, and it's still processing, it's still happening, because we have so much conditioning. But I will say that the step in this next chapter is that we begin to liberate ourselves from our conditioning. And what I mean by this is that each chapter actually has a test at the end of the chapter. And if we fail the test, if we don't pass the test, then we stay in the chapter. If we do pass the test, then we progress past that chapter and into the next chapter. Be aware that it is possible to regress to one of the previous chapters even though you've passed that test. So you can liberate yourself from conditioning and then fall back into conditioning. That's possible. Okay, so liberating ourselves from conditioning. This involves releasing just conditioning in our mind, in our behavior, and everything that we do. And the only way we can liberate from this conditioning is if we replace it with new conditioning. Basically, this chapter, and I'm still on this chapter that I'm talking about, because it is very much one of the ones that is absolutely key. I mean, they're all key, but this one specifically is especially, because basically all of our past conditioning was based upon fear. So, for example, if I always react in an angry way when someone pushes my buttons or stresses me out, I'm reacting based on fear. If I always, and this one has been a tough one for me, but you know, I feel like I've really hit a breaking point with this, is that if I always, when I come to a social occasion, happen to need to drink because of fear of being who I am around people, well then, being who I am naturally, well then that's based on fear. That's conditioning based on fear. Now we can replace all of this with love. We can replace all this conditioning with love, truly. And when this happens, then everything that we start to do is actually an antidote to the previous conditioning and is based on love and love alone. Basically, coming into contact with people and just expressing myself just as I am. And that is love. That is true love. Okay, now, the test is always given. So there's always a test given. So there's always, an opportunity to use this conditioning, this new conditioning based on love. And if we fail to use our new conditioning based on love and we revert back to our old conditioning, then we fail the test. And sometimes we can ask ourselves, oh, well, if everything's a test, well, then what are the answers to the test? We all have the answers to the test. We all get the answers to the test. Through our experiences, we learn. This is what learning is about. There's a saying that goes something like, I believe Einstein said it, that repeating the same thing, expecting different results is madness. That is madness. Now, sanity is making mistakes and then learning from them and then growing and then replacing them with the antidote. And so let's get to the next chapter. All right. The next chapter is, I believe, to truly be loving unconditionally. Loving unconditionally. Unconditional love. No matter what. And this can be difficult sometimes. Depending on a situation and depending on just so many things. It can be difficult sometimes. And actually, in this chapter, one of the things that was holding me back was the fear of loving unconditionally. I feel like we can fear to love unconditionally. It's an actuality thing, as wild as that sounds. There is such a thing as fearing to love unconditionally because we feel so vulnerable. We feel so vulnerable to, walk out into the world with our heart open and no matter what other people do, we deciding to love no matter what. Loving people, loving just anyone and everyone. And this is where true liberation lies, because how do we just grow? How do we truly live life ecstatically? Is loving unconditionally. no matter what, no matter circumstance. That's what unconditionally means. And we are here to love unconditionally. And once we love unconditionally, then oh my, are we in for a treat. Anything, I mean, the sky's the limit, because then we aren't governed by selfish agendas, or we aren't governed by me, but rather it's just like, wow, love is here, love is true, love is great, love is all there is. And it's time we bring this love to others. It's time that we bring this love into anything that we're doing, and really truly just and this is where individuality comes into play, and our unique blueprint, because each and every person will do something unique with their own love. Some people will bring this love into ballet, Some people will bring this love into engineering, just really, really, really progressive creations. Some people will bring this love to taking care of elderly people. Some people will bring this love into a relationship. And I mean, at this chapter, the only way that relationship will work is if both sides of the equation are loving unconditionally, or else it'll never work. And so this is where one can feel I want to say alone, but not lonely, because lonely implies that there's something wrong with it, and there's nothing wrong with just loving and just being alone. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Actually, all you need is love. And wow, woo. So man, last thing I wanted to mention was probably emotions. Emotions are the dial to change the station coming through. Man, emotions are becoming aware of emotions. That's when we find our internal compass, really. Emotions will always give you the answers to anything and everything. So however you're feeling about anything, that tells you whether that's the way or that's not the way. And so, to not drag this out anymore, I want to just ask a few questions. I want to ask, what chapters are we in? I want to ask, what are the tests that we've been given? I want to ask, have we passed the test? Have we failed the test? If we failed to pass the test, because I failed the test countless times, my oh my, but you know what? Here we are now. and I'm so grateful to have suffered the suffering that I've suffered, and I can't even imagine what you've suffered. But you know what? It's time to love. It's time to surpass the suffering. It's time to live life in love with life, in love with love. Thank you. Whew. Okay, well,